If you thought things were bad in Ann Arbor before the win over Rutgers, well, take a look what's going on at Penn State. It's been far from a happy valley for the Nittany Lions, as Anthony Bellino from Fox Sports Radio Morning Blitz here in Toledo, 12:30 a.m. joins us now. And Anthony, we'll get to the Nittany Lions in a moment, but we got to talk about Cade McNamara. We got to talk about the way Michigan played once Cade McNamara came into the game in the second quarter against Rutgers, down 17-0. He leads them to the comeback victory. The eventual comeback victory. What have you seen that makes the offense go better with Cade McNamara in the game?
I mean, Mark, I think it's just that can we find a quarterback that can accurately throw the football? Can a quarterback throw it with some touch? I think that there was so much promise in week number one with Joe Milton. And this has been said over and over and over again with John O'Corn. Oh, we finally found our quarterback. With Wilton Spate, found our quarterback. With Shea Patterson, Michigan finally found their quarterback. And then Shea left, and then it was like, hey, Joe Milton finally found a quarterback. It's one game, and it's a very small sample size. But the offense seemed to move the football better. That felt like they had a better rhythm. It felt like Cade was a lot more accurate. I mean, he was 27 of 36 for 260 yards and 4 touchdowns through the air, add another touchdown on the ground. And he was everything that, I think that the Michigan fan base wanted Joe Milton to be, that Joe Milton was not. This job is very much Cade McNamara's from here on forward. It's the only way that they're going to be able to at least stay, somewhat competitive. The fact that, Mark, let's get down to business here. 48-42 against Rutgers. Rutgers' highest scoring output this season is now on Michigan. They joined the ranks of Wisconsin. Their best offensive game so far this season was Michigan State. I mean, you see the trend we're having here, right? That is the fact that Michigan's defense continues to get blowtorched each and every single week. And now you need a performance like Cade McNamara to bring you back in triple overtime against Rutgers. Look, no offense against Rutgers, but they're 1-4 for a reason. They beat Michigan State because Michigan State turned the ball over 7 times and then was 0 for 2 on 4th down conversions, which means you basically have 9 turnovers in that football game. Rutgers should be 0-5 this season. They took Michigan to triple overtime. So Cade McNamara is a very nice story. I think it does allow for some positive thoughts moving forward into next week against Penn State. But Mark, don't let this team fool you right now. This team is not in a good position. The defense is atrocious, and it's only getting worse.
Would you feel better about the win over Rutgers if they won that game 35-27? If that defense came up with one final stop in the fourth quarter, didn't allow the game to go to overtime, would that make you feel any better about that win?
Oh, yes and no. Yes and no. I still think that, for a team like Michigan with the talent that they are allegedly supposed to have, when Rutgers is getting close to 30 points on you, you're in trouble. I think that there is a lot there. I mean, obviously the injuries hurt. If you're losing Kwity Paye, you lose Cam McGrone, you lose Aiden Hutchinson. Why can't I remember who opted out of the season? Ambry Thomas opted out of the season before it even started. You're talking about the amount of talent that was on that defense that is gone. And now it's like, what, the cupboards are bare. We don't have anybody else that can come in here and play a little football for us. I think it's very, very concerning if you're a Michigan fan that Rutgers had the offensive output that they've had. Wisconsin, Michigan State. It's a trend. It's a trend. It's like me getting on here complaining about the defense. That is also a trend, Mark. That's what is happening here. It's consistent every week.
Well, let's talk about one trend that's going the opposite way now, the rushing game. Hassan Haskins came into the game against Rutgers as Michigan's leading rusher for the season with just 168 yards through 4 games. You want 168 yards out of one game for Michigan running back, not out of 4 games. Finally, we saw a consistent effort from the run game. Maybe it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg question with the fact that McNamara was getting the offense going through the air a little bit. That opened up some things on the ground game, or the ground game opened up some things in the passing game. But either way, we finally saw a breakout game from Hassan Haskins. And I want to say a year ago against Rutgers, he had a big game against Rutgers. And it goes back to a question we've had a couple of times. Why won't Michigan just go with one guy as a featured back instead of going with this stable of backs and not allowing any of those guys to get into a rhythm?
I think that could be maybe the key point in the rushing attack. Now, obviously, it's Rutgers, so Michigan's offensive line should dominate a Rutgers offensive line. Let's be very, very upfront and frank about that. But also, Hassan Haskins with 24 carries. Zach Charbonnet had 6. Blake Corum had 4. Chris Evans had 1. Hassan Haskins was the feature back. He was the main guy. He was the guy that they were going to give those carries to. And I like that commitment to him. I thought we saw a couple of runs by Hassan throughout this game in which he showed patience in order to follow blocks, wait for holes to develop, even cut back against the grain when nothing seemed there. His vision and patience as a runner, I thought was really on display and something that Michigan fans could be very, very excited about and take it with a grain grain of salt because it is Rutgers. Also, when you have a pass game that is at least it's somewhat effective, I'm not saying they're world beaters, but at least completing some passes down the field, as you mentioned, it will open some things up for the run game. You can start to work into play action, complementary football, right? Your passing attack can help your run game. Your run game can help your passing, and it can in the way that you can call plays and how open your playbook is when you're ahead of the sticks and consistently. And then when you're running the football, you are literally proving to the other team that we're stronger up front than you are. You begin to break their will a little bit. I think what's important is though, even though Michigan went down in this football game, they still got 24 carries to Hassan Haskins. And if you remember our conversation, Mark, that was one thing I was really, I wouldn't say distraught over, but I would say discouraged is probably the right word. Because when it's, 17-7 at the end of the first half, Michigan didn't steer away from that run game. They did not allow themselves to get caught up and just be like, hey, we're just going to push down the field through the air the entire game. Hassan Haskins still finished with 24 carries in that football game. And I think that is something as well. Do not give up just because you're down early and you're behind on the scoreboard. It doesn't mean that the sky is falling. We all have to be Chicken Little. You do get a halftime. You do get a second half. It's a 4-quarter football game. You got to finish.
And on this coming Saturday, Penn State comes into Ann Arbor. Nittany Lions have not won a game all season. And this is a Nittany Lions team that coming into this year was thought to be a top 10, maybe even a top 5 team. They've certainly been hurt by injuries and opt-outs, particularly in their running back room. But this is a team that really, since they lost that week 1 game to Indiana, has not looked the same. Ohio State rolled over them, and they just have gone progressively worse each and every week. And now I know some Michigan fans are going to look at this and say, well, this is a Penn State team it's ripe for that victory. But at the same time, this is a Penn State team that just has not looked good. Now, I don't know if this is going to be the victory for Penn State.
I can't figure Penn State out. This past week, they're at home against Iowa. They lose by 20 points at home. In the Indiana game, to lose in overtime, and the way that they lost with Michael Penix diving for the pylon there, okay, that's all right. It's Indiana. It turns out Indiana's kind of good. And then in week 2, they played Ohio State to the tune of 38-25. And it makes me wonder if that game was really the one that cracked Penn State's soul. I've been looking for Michigan to play with some spirit. I've been looking for Michigan to play with a little bit of zest, a little bit of urgency, a little bit of, hey, guess what? Our hair's on fire. And it doesn't really matter at this point if we catch a flag for a late hit, but somebody better go out there and knock somebody's head off, right? For lack of a better way to put it. I've been looking for that out of Michigan. Penn State is another team where it is like a wounded dog right now. It's just going back to the back of the woods to lick its wounds and lay down and just kind of bleed out. And I'm sorry I painted that picture for anybody who lost a dog. I love dogs. I'm a dog lover. The Penn State Nittany Lions, they're toast, Mark. This team does not have a spirit. James Franklin, this is one of the most puzzling questions I think that has faced the Big Ten this year. And when you ask people, what are you surprised about? Is it the fact that Indiana's been up top, or Ohio State typical, but Northwestern's having a good year? That's a pretty good surprise. I mean, Pat Fitzgerald's done a nice job there, but the fact that Michigan and Penn State are as bad as they are, and Penn State is really bad. Where's the spirit? Where's the soul? Where's the care level, the buy-in? Where's James Franklin at? All I've been told is what a great recruiter this guy is, and what a great coach this guy is. And sure, they've had some nice seasons, but I don't see any difference between him, frankly, and Jim Harbaugh. I see a lot of hype, a lot of talk, and not a whole lot of results, and really, typically struggling against Ohio State. This Penn State team needs this win on Saturday. I hate to even think and even put my foot in my mouth this early, since we're talking early in the week, but Michigan should win this game. It's in Ann Arbor. It's a noon kickoff on ABC. I feel bad for the ABC crew that's got to work this one, because this thing is putrid on paper when you look at it. But this is a game where, Penn State's got to show me some fight. At 0-5, show me you care at least a little bit. To act like you give a damn just for 4 quarters. I'd be very interested to see what happens with Penn State this week in Ann Arbor.
You raise an interesting point about Jim Harbaugh and James Franklin. I'd say the only difference between the two is James Franklin has a win over Ohio State thanks to a blocked field goal in 2016 that Penn State returned for a touchdown. I think James Franklin's got to be thankful every day that Jim Harbaugh's in the Big Ten East and getting all this attention about his coaching future, because I think there's some serious questions about James Franklin, about the success they have or have not had, particularly this year. And there's some very disturbing reports out just recently about some off-field incidents with Penn State under James Franklin.
They can't shake the off the field stuff. I don't know why that is and how that is. I think that, earlier this week, we learned that Scott Loeffler at Bowling Green, they had some players get suspended, and it was like, look, we're not even going to deal with this. That's really the attitude you have to take. I don't know, and I kind of like to err on the side of caution with what Nick Saban said years ago. I think it was like Musa Muhammad, I believe, is who he was discussing in his time with Michigan State. But everybody wanted to call for a kid to get kicked off the team, and he said, "What's the better option here?" Depending on what the offense is. Now, some offenses, you can suspend a kid, you can have him run the wind sprints. If he's out committing crimes, and there's nothing you can really do about that, you're a criminal, you're going to pay the price. But for Penn State, you gotta just like lower the hammer on everybody. Just say, hey, look, you're either going to conform. We're not even having a 3-strike rule. You get in trouble here, you're gone, and that's it. Because they have way too much of a history with off the field issues, criminal activity, and everything else being swept under the rug there in Happy Valley. That they just can't afford stuff like that. And back to your original point about James Franklin, he is a guy to where when you look at Michigan and the pressure that the Michigan program is under consistently, this is where guys at Michigan State, at Penn State, at Wisconsin, they can all get a pass because we all know Ohio State runs this conference. There's no question about that whatsoever. But as long as Michigan and Jim Harbaugh are there eating up the headlines, everybody else can kind of skate a little bit because at least we're not Michigan, right? And I think that if this game gets ugly for James Franklin, this season's already bad. I think he might have a little bit of an out based on some of the injuries they've had, some of the opt-outs that they've had. Outside of that, he comes back with another bad season next year, and Penn State might be looking for a new coach as well.
We talked quite a bit last week about the energy of the Michigan program, if they're going to bring that energy against Rutgers. That energy eventually did show up, obviously, after the quarterback switch. Is that something else to keep an eye on this week against Penn State to see if they can, from the get-go, bring that juice, as Jim Harbaugh called it this week?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, offensively, they're going to try to, what worked against Rutgers, how can we apply that to this Penn State game? Defensively, that's where you're going to need every ounce of juice. There was a video that was circulating around, I want to say 2018, maybe during the revenge tour. Don Brown's giving a speech. I think Rashawn Gary's there in the locker room. Don Brown's giving a very passionate speech about how the offenses have to fear you. Nobody fears this team. And that's a problem. And sometimes throughout the course of a football game, someone is going to have to make a violent play in order to send a message to another team that, hey, this is our territory. If you come across the middle, we're going to knock your teeth out. There is none of that with this team right now. There is no reason for another offense to have any sort of fear towards that Michigan defense. That's something that they need to bring. That's an intestinal fortitude type of situation. When they come out of that locker room, they better be able to put their helmets on some Penn State players and be ready to get the pads cracking a little bit. Because if you can set that tone early and you can dominate up front of the line of scrimmage, you can shift the way, you can break the spirit of the other team. And that's one thing that Michigan has not yet done. Teams are not afraid to punch Michigan because they want to see if Michigan will even hit back.
We'll find out if Michigan will hit back Saturday at noon in Ann Arbor. I want to thank our guest, Anthony Bellino, from the Morning Blitz on Fox Sports Radio here in Toledo, 12:30 a.m. Anthony, thank you for your time.
Mark, we'll see you next week.